Good morning. Senate Commerce Committee will come to order. It's incredibly hard to be a kid right now. All the parents I know, myself included, are deeply concerned about all the time that kids spend glued to screens, watching and reading insidious content that puts their minds and their bodies at risk. Parents are fighting a constant battle to keep their children safe in a rapidly evolving digital world. For instance, there has been a stunning increase in exploitative AI-generated deepfake revenge porn and images of victims, very frequently teenage girls. Thankfully, Congress rose to meet this challenge and passed my and Senator Klobuchar's bill, the Take It Down Act, which makes clear that if you create and spread these heinous images of anyone, you'll face the full force of the law. But there's clearly much more work to be done to protect children online. Given the prevalence of online devices, children are often introduced to screens at a very young age and end up using them for a significant portion of the day. Children ages 8 to 12 now use screens an average of 5.5 hours each and every day. For teens, it's even higher, at 8 hours and 39 minutes each and every single day. Put another way, more than half of the time that a teenager is awake, he or she is staring at a screen. Parents intuitively know that excessive use of internet-connected devices like smartphones and tablets poses significant physical and mental health risks to children. Even many kids know it's a problem. Surveys routinely show large numbers of teenagers admit to spending way too much time each day on a smartphone. Kids need time to be kids, to experience the real world, not to get lost in a virtual one. This phone-based childhood, predominantly spent on social media, has been documented to lead to social awkwardness, reduced self-confidence, a more sedentary childhood, fragmented attention, disrupted learning, addiction, and social withdrawal. With the introduction of the smartphone, we've also seen a rise in teen mental health disorders, anxiety, and depression. In 2023, 1 out of 5 children had a mental or behavioral problem diagnosis. We've also seen significant increases in child and teen suicide rates. Something is very wrong. And I don't believe it is merely a coincidence, as our witnesses will discuss today, that these harms are rising alongside the early and excessive use of screens. Sadly, parents face further challenges in monitoring and limiting their children's screen time, in part because our education system, fueled by federal subsidies and incentives, has increasingly required the use of internet-connected devices in schools. Most students are now assigned laptops or tablets, often without guardrails or parental controls, in order to complete their schoolwork. There aren't many parents who think it has become easier to help with schoolwork or to cut down on screen time when schools send their kids home with a personal tablet. There's a role, to be sure, for technology in the classroom. But we should discuss whether assigning personal devices to children is actually improving academic outcomes or doing more harm than good. During the Biden administration, not only did congressional Democrats give billions of dollars to the FCC to buy personal internet devices for children, but the Biden FCC sought to bankroll kids' unsupervised internet access and undermine parental rights by expanding the E-rate program to install Wi-Fi hotspots off campus, including in school buses and students' homes. I was proud that the Senate passed my legislation to repeal this program, and I hope that the House lawmakers pass it now and send it to the President's desk. Senator Schatz and I also have advanced the Kids Off Social Media Act, which this committee passed overwhelmingly back in February of last year to help protect kids on social media, the predominant use of a smartphone. COSMA meets parents where they're at. It's a real struggle to keep your kid offline when you're told that all my friends are on Instagram or TikTok. It's incredibly hard to be the one parent who won't let your kid have a phone or social media account. So COSMA says we're going to hold big tech accountable to their terms of service. Big tech says no one under 13 can set up an account. COSMA makes that the law. No more social media for children and no more addictive algorithms for teenagers. COSMA also gets cell phones out of the classroom. No school getting federal taxpayer dollars would allow kids to access social media in the classroom. I am hopeful that the House will pass this bill, the Senate will pass this bill, and we will send it to the President's desk to become law. I want to thank the witnesses who are here with us today, and I look forward to this critical discussion about how we can best protect children and empower parents. With that, I recognize Ranking Member Cantwell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for calling this hearing today, and thank you for the witnesses testifying. Children's safety online is not a partisan issue. Every parent, teacher, lawmaker wants the same things. We want kids who are safe, healthy, and able to thrive. The real problem is that social media apps are deliberately engineered to hook kids, to keep them clicking, scrolling, and coming back, and they're doing that exactly by design. The University of Washington released a study last week finding that teenagers spend on average more than an hour per day on smartphones during school hours, and 1 in 4 students spends a quarter of their school day on those personal phones. Most of the time was spent on Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, YouTube, and video games. Social media platforms have built their business models around capturing attention, and they have become extraordinarily good at it. These companies collect vast amounts of data on children, use algorithmic targeting to feed them content designed to keep them scrolling, because for these platforms, engagement equals revenue. Dr. Radesky, am I saying that correctly? Dr. Radesky, you say, quote, most digital products used by youth were designed by adults for adults, only retrofitted for youth usage, and harms were recognized. And the harms are impossible to ignore, end quote. Research at Rutgers University found 20 studies demonstrated a significant relationship between social media use and body image concerns. An Australian research team recently found that TikTok's algorithm delivers video after video about dieting and exercise to people suffering from eating disorders, and 2/3 of the kids are exposed to hate-based content online. Dr. Radesky, you found that roughly 40% of teens had concerning trajectories for media addiction, which doubles their risk for suicide behavior. We look forward to hearing more in your testimony. Study after study shows that heavy social media use is associated with higher rates of anxiety, depression, and feelings of isolation among youth and people, and one of the reasons why I sought action by Congress to do something about TikTok. Parents see this clearly. 80% say social media causes more harm than benefit to their children. Congress is obligated to act, but rather focusing on threatening E-rates, connectivity for school, I think we should be passing meaningful protections for kids' online privacy, regardless of whether they're accessing the internet from home or school. This includes Senator Markey's COPPA Bill 2.0, Senator Blackburn's COSA Bill, which updates children's privacy protections and limits exploitive design and data practices. I thank them both for their leadership. Ultimately, protecting children also requires, I believe, comprehensive federal privacy legislation that fully safeguards the children in the system and allows everyone's data to be protected. The American Privacy Rights Act that I released with former Energy and Commerce Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers would establish that standard. But in the absence of federal legislation, states and governments have stepped up. School districts across the country have introduced smartphone policies. In the state of Washington, 75% of school districts have policies limiting access to personal smart devices during the school day, 75%. These state efforts are becoming even more critical, and I know we're going to hear from our witnesses on this, as AI accelerates. It amplifies and makes the existing privacy and social media concerns even more imperative. Last week, we saw X's Grok chatbot generating nearly 10,000 deepfake sexualized images an hour, including non-consensual images of minors. It is unconscionable and unlawful that these images are proliferating. The FTC, I believe, should enforce the law, the Take It Down Act that my colleague and Senator Klobuchar led on, and Grok needs to clean up its act. Dr. Radesky, you also highlight how children are showing troubling beliefs around AI chatbots, including that kids think these products can think and have feelings and be their friends. That is why I joined Senator Klobuchar in a letter to the Consumer Product Safety Commission regarding the safety of integration of AI into children's toys. We need meaningful safeguards on AI to address the harms they cause. That is why we cannot tell states to stand down from protecting their kids, especially when we need Congress to put standards in place. Over the last decade, Congress has failed to act on social media becoming more pervasive to harm kids. We cannot make the same mistake now that AI is becoming more pervasive. We need to address online and AI harms before it's too late, particularly for kids, and our goal cannot be to keep kids away from technology. Students need digital skills for the 21st century, for the economy, for their communication with parents, for schools to play a critical role in teaching. We need technologies and policies designed with children in mind. And we know we need that these designs can't be about just maximizing profits. I know there's a lot of agreement here among members. I hope we can work together. I hope we can move forward on important legislation. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I'd now like to introduce our witnesses for today. Our first witness is Jean Twenge, who is a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. She is a renowned expert in psychology with over 190 scientific publications, and she is the author of several books. Our second witness is Jared Cooney Horvath, director of LME Global. Dr. Horvath is a neuroscientist and author specializing in human learning and brain development. Our third witness is Emily Cherkin, author and founder of the Screentime Consultant. Ms. Cherkin gives professional advice to parents on the dangers of excessive screen time use and its impact on childhood development. She is also an associate professor at the University of Washington's Evans School of Public Policy. Our final witness is Jenny Radesky. Dr. Radesky is an associate professor of pediatrics at the University of Michigan Medical School. She is also the co-director of the American Academy of Pediatrics Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. Dr. Twenge, we'll start with your opening remarks.
Member Cantwell for the invite today. My name is Jean Twenge. I'm a professor of psychology at San Diego State University. I'm going to base my remarks on the slides that you should have in front of you. So I research generational differences. I've been doing that for 3 decades. I got used to seeing changes that were big, but they would take a decade or 2 to get there. Then around 2012, in some of the large national surveys of adolescents, I started to see changes that were bigger and more sudden. I had really never seen anything like it. So for example, more and more teens said that they felt left out. More said that they felt lonely. More said they felt like they couldn't do anything right, that their life wasn't useful, that they didn't enjoy life. And these are classic symptoms of depression. Major depressive episodes, so clinical level depression that really requires treatment, doubled among both adolescents and young adults before the COVID pandemic, between 2011 and 2019. And it's not just symptoms, it's also behaviors. Emergency room admissions for self-harm behaviors, which are linked to depression, doubled among 15 to 19-year-old girls and young women, and quadrupled among 10 to 14-year-old girls. The suicide rate in these adolescent age groups doubled over that time period, which begs the question, what happened around 2012 that might explain that? That was the question that I had when I first started to see these trends more than 10 years ago. And at first I had no idea, didn't line up with the economy. It was a big puzzle. Then I came across a poll, things started to fall into place, because one thing that happened at the end of 2012 was that is the first time that the majority of Americans owned smartphones. It's also when social media use moved from optional to virtually mandatory among middle and high school students. Other things happened at the same time. Adolescents and young adults started spending a lot less time with friends and family in person. That time was nearly cut in half. Also declined among older age groups, but not by as much. Teens also started sleeping less. The number who sleep less than 7 hours a night, which is a significant amount of sleep deprivation in this group, started to skyrocket right around that same time. And sure enough, teens who spend more time using social media are much more likely to be depressed, particularly among girls. A study in the UK found that heavy users of social media among girls were 3 times more likely to be depressed. And this is not just correlation, it is causation. At this point, there are a number of studies where people are asked to cut back or give up social media. There was one with families, so children and adolescents, done in Denmark. They severely restricted children's screen time. And at the end of that time, the parents reported that the children were less likely to have anger issues, less anxiety and depression, and fewer total difficulties. And it's not just mental health. Academic performance among U.S. 8th and 12th graders also began to decline around 2012. And the same pattern is seen worldwide in the PISA data set. So one reason for that, the use of phones and tablets and laptops for leisure purposes during the school day. As Ranking Member Cantwell mentioned, there's a recent study showing that high school students in the U.S. are using their phones for about an hour and 10 minutes during the school day, mostly for social media and watching videos. I did a recent study looking at the PISA data set worldwide, and the decline in standardized test scores on science was much more severe in countries where students spent more time for leisure purposes on devices during the school day. I think this leads to at least 4 policy avenues. One, follow Australia, raise the minimum age for social media to 16 and actually verify age. Set a minimum age, 16 or probably 18, for AI companion apps. So the AI boyfriends and girlfriends, the AI sexy chat apps. So we don't have 12-year-olds having their first romantic relationship with a chatbot. And then for ChatGPT and AI that is used for research, have guardrails. So those types of conversations that have already led to some tragic suicides do not happen. Third, no phones during the school day, bell to bell for students. And fourth, that school-issued devices are used for school, are used for educational purposes, that they block social media, that they block streaming services like Netflix and Disney+, and that they block pornography sites. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Dr. Horvath.
Thank you, guys. My name is Dr. Jared Cooney Horvath. I'm a former teacher turned cognitive neuroscientist who focuses on human learning. And I do not receive funding, nor have I ever, from big tech. So a sad fact our generation has to face is this. Our kids are less cognitively capable than we were at their age. Since we've been standardizing and measuring cognitive development since the late 1800s, every generation has outperformed their parents, and that's exactly what we want. We want sharper kids. And the reason for this largely has been school. Each generation spends more time in school. We use school to develop our cognition. Congratulations, you see your correlation. Until Gen Z. Gen Z is the first generation in modern history to underperform us on basically every cognitive measure we have, from basic attention, to memory, to literacy, to numeracy, to executive functioning, to even general IQ, even though they go to more school than we did. So why? What happened? What happened around 2010 that decoupled schooling from cognitive development? It can't be school. Schools basically look the same. It can't be biology. This hasn't had enough time to change. The answer appears to be the tools we are using within schools to drive that learning. Across 80 countries, as Jean was just saying, if you look at the data, once countries adopt digital technology widely in schools, performance goes down significantly, to the point where kids who use computers about 5 hours per day in school for learning purposes will score over 2/3 of a standard deviation less than kids who rarely or never touch tech at school. And that's across 80 countries. Bring it home to the US. Let's go to the US. We have our NAEP. That's our big data. Take any state, and here's a fun experiment you can try. Take any state NAEP data, compare that to when that state adopted one-to-one technology widely, and watch what happens. The NAEP data will plateau and then start to drop. Now, as Jean said, of course, this is all correlative. What we really want is causative. To get causation, what you need is academic research, and you need mechanisms, explanations for why we're seeing what we're seeing. Luckily, we have academic research stretching back to 1962 that shows the exact same story for 60 years. When tech enters education, learning goes down. In fact, one of the biggest ed psychologists right now, Dylan William out of the UK, recently said, ed tech is a revolution that's been coming for 60 years. And we're gonna have to wait another 60 because it ain't doing anything. Now that's research, but now we need mechanisms. Luckily, over the last about 2 decades, we've been doing a lot of work in what we call the science of learning. How do human beings learn? And we now have the clear understanding of why tech does not work for learning, and it is all biological. It's not that the tech isn't being used well enough, we haven't been trained enough, we need better programs. It's we have evolved biologically to learn from other human beings, not from screens. And screens circumvent that process. I won't go too deeply into the mechanisms, they can get boring, but just know they're there if you want to talk about them. So that leaves us with 2 options. Option 1, when you know something is wrong, do better. So we could just say, hey, mea culpa, get some of this tech out of schools, go back to what we know works, some analog methods, cool. Or 2, we could redefine our terms. We could redefine what it means to be an effective learner. I want to end with one quick story here. Think back to your childhood, to your schooling. I guarantee all of us at one point took a test on reading comprehension. And the way it looked is this. Here's a passage of about 750 words. Here are 10 to 12 questions about that passage. Most of them are inferential, not factual. They're asking you to go beyond what you just read to see what you understood. Cool. Last year, the SATs had a reading comprehension section. Here's what it looked like. Here is a single sentence of 75 words. Here is one question, fact-based, about that sentence. Next. Here is another sentence of 75 words. Here is one question about that sentence. Next. Last year, they redefined reading comprehension to mean 54 short sentences with one question about each. That is skimming. That's not reading. Why would we ever do that? Because what do kids do on computers? They skim. So rather than determining what do we want our children to do and gearing education towards that, we are redefining education to better suit the tool. That's not progress, that is surrender. So as we go through our discussion today, there's gonna be a lot of talk about smartphones and social media, rightly so. But I'm the voice here to remind you that even in schools, it doesn't matter what the size of the screen is, if it's a phone, if it's a laptop, if it's a desktop, and it doesn't matter who bought it. Is it school sanctioned? Does it have the word education stamped on it? It doesn't matter. All of these things are also gonna hurt learning, which in turn are gonna hurt our kids' cognitive development, right at the time when we need our kids to be sharper than we are. So thank you guys so much for today. I look forward to talking with y'all.
Thank you, Ms. Cherkin.
Chairman, Member Cantwell, and Senators, thank you for the invitation to speak today. My name is Emily Cherkin. I'm a parent, author, speaker, and on faculty at the University of Washington. I do not accept funding from tech companies for my work. I am here today with a warning. Technology is fundamentally changing childhood and, in the process, undermining parents and threatening the very health of democracy. Let me paint you a picture. Today in America, 40% of 2-year-olds have a personal tablet. Children 8 to 18 are averaging 7.5 hours a day on screens outside of school hours. Nearly 90% of American public schools provide children with internet-connected devices for learning. Occupational therapists tell me they have to teach young children how to turn the pages of a book. Preschool teachers report that toddlers don't like getting their hands dirty anymore. I know one teen so addicted to his phone, he seals it in a Ziploc bag and brings it into the shower with him. 26% of 13 to 17-year-olds use ChatGPT to do their schoolwork, which they access on laptops school gives them. My own university students have never received handwritten feedback on their papers. Elementary school children are literally falling out of their chairs in classrooms because they lack the core strength to sit for long periods of time. One child viewed more than 13,000 YouTube videos in less than 3 months at school on his school-issued laptop. This juxtaposition of childhood innocence and technology's overreach can be seen in a final anecdote. In a class of middle schoolers still losing their baby teeth, they imitate sex noises they hear online. But doesn't technology make our lives easier and prepare our children for the future? Unfortunately, no, in spite of the rosy claims made by technology companies. As a result, the wholesale restructuring of childhood around screens is catastrophic for children and families and has led us to 4 crises. First, a mental health crisis. Screen use before 2 years of age is linked to accelerated anxiety by age 13. Today, 1 in 3 teen girls has seriously contemplated suicide. The youth mental health crisis is so dire it has elicited a warning from the Surgeon General. Second, we face a learning crisis. As schools double down on ed tech products, reading and math scores are plummeting. One study found that investing in air conditioning yields a 30% increase in learning outcomes over investing in technology. We are quite literally wasting education dollars on ineffective technologies. Third, a crisis in creativity. A 15-year-old in Kentucky told me that she feels like the older kids are the lucky ones. In an after-school elementary drama class, she said to the younger children, "Let's pretend we're flying." They looked at her and said, "How?" If children can't pretend to fly, they cannot imagine and therefore cannot innovate. Creativity means having an original thought. Technology access in childhood does not enhance creativity, it kills it, and this threatens the future of entrepreneurship in America. Remember, today's tech giants had analog, play-based childhoods. Finally, the enmeshment of technology in childhood is creating a crisis for our democracy. Thomas Jefferson said, "An informed citizenry is at the heart of a dynamic democracy." When children spend hours being fed algorithmically driven rage bait content designed to increase engagement, they lose the ability to form their own opinions, detect bias, and think critically. Informed citizens? Hardly. All of this is by design, of course. Technology companies build their products to hook and hold our attention, and children's brains are especially vulnerable. To make their products safer, tech companies would have to compromise profits, and they don't want to. As a result, the business model of big tech and ed tech is fundamentally at odds with child development, and its intrusion into family life undermines the choices parents can make. This is not a kid problem. It is an adult problem that is impacting children, but parents especially need help. Parents might delay access to smartphones and social media only for their children to view TikTok videos on a friend's phone. Parents can block YouTube at home only to get direct access for their children on school laptops. Senators, I invite you to think about your own childhoods, the teachers who inspired you, the awkward social moments, triumphing over a difficult high school essay, making or not making the basketball team. We remember these moments because in the discomfort we learned something. Friction is the learning process. When we seek benefits from the convenience of technology, we forget the benefits of struggle. We've reached a moment that demands we slow down and build things, even when the tech industry insists on the opposite. Legislation like the Kids Off Social Media Act is a start, and I believe we can go farther. Just as we have done with regulating alcohol and tobacco, we can do so with technology too. Parents are not naive. We know that our children will use technology for work and life and adulthood. We just want to ensure they have a childhood first. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Radesky.
Thank you, Chairman Cruz and Ranking Member Cantwell. I'm so happy to be here for the opportunity to testify on this important issue. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician at the University of Michigan, where my NICHD-funded research lab examines how children and parents use technology, how this impacts parent-child relationships and children's self-regulation. I do a lot of translation of research into either policy or clinical guidance through the American Academy of Pediatrics, including their Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health. And last year, I led the first behavioral team at the Federal Trade Commission, where I helped a bunch of really great teams enforce cases related to child well-being. I need to say my testimony today reflects my own views as a researcher and clinician, does not reflect the views of the Federal Trade Commission, any of the commissioners, the AAP, or the University of Michigan. Parenting around technology today is exhausting, and many young people are really struggling with healthy relationships with technology. We often blame ourselves for this, but there are systems-level reasons why this is happening. The digital ecosystem has been shaped by a move fast and break things ethos, which means digital products are released rapidly, they get to scale before they can consider what youth really need, the unique ways that young people think, feel, and relate that are different from adults. Most digital products used by youth were designed by adults for adults and then, retrofitted in minor ways once harms were realized. And tech companies are often designing their products to optimize engagement. So they follow metrics like daily active users, view time, but this is often at direct odds with what we need as parents to get our kids a good night's sleep or to focus on their homework. So that's why it's not sufficient to just talk about screen time. We need to shift our thinking and action to be about design, whether tech products are centered around youth developmental needs and well-being, or are they designed around profits and market share. For example, I'll highlight a few things from my research lab that have identified some of the mechanisms around engagement-based design. We track a lot of kids' devices, little kids and older kids. We have found a lot of easy access to inappropriate content. We have found preschoolers and tweens and teens using apps with mature ratings, with flags, for example, for violence or for gambling. This has relevance for device settings, app store policies, and product-level age assurance. We find manipulative designs. 99% of apps that we studied had at least one design that tried to engage kids for longer or monetize their time through ads or purchase pressure, often from characters that they trusted. This contributes to compulsive use and more conflict and difficulty transitioning away from that device when time is up. We also found a lot of collection and sharing of private identifiers in a 2020 study, and they were sending this data to marketing databases, which kids cannot understand or consent to. And finally, when we track teens' phones, we see lots of designs like frequent notifications or use of social media with algorithmic feeds that invades other important spaces for youth development, like school, sleep, or having a conversation with your family. We're seeing these same engagement-based designs being applied to AI chatbots, and that concerns me because they also carry a further risk of relationship development and dependence. This is all happening within the context of a child mental health crisis and a loneliness epidemic, so we hear a lot about kids and teens soothing themselves with frictionless feeds or games, while in the background, platforms are conducting A/B tests to keep us on longer, and that is not okay. So we know that better, more child-centered design exists, but it can't often compete in the marketplace where products are rewarded for their addictiveness and not whether they support youth well-being. So I'll wrap up by just applying some of these lessons from the consumer tech marketplace to the ed tech concerns that have been expressed today. I believe ed tech use needs to be developmentally aligned. There need to be conversations about whether one-to-one devices are appropriate for kids, especially in K-5. We need effective filtering software that eliminates distractions. So many of my patients use video games, YouTube, or AI chatbots on their school-issued devices, and it's getting in the way of them engaging with the curriculum. We need intentional strategies that prevent use of ed tech for behavior management or downtime, because that's what I'm also hearing from patients. And we need a rigorous evidence base to make sure that the ed tech products that kids are using are really rigorously tested. So in summary, I support an approach that puts pressure upstream on tech companies rather than schools. This means passing federal legislation with strong enforcement mechanisms like COSA and COPPA so that kids can participate in the digital world with less risk of harm, but also have their time and attention respected so they can log off when they want and go live their lives with agency and purpose. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, I want to start with Dr. Twenge and Ms. Cherkin. A lot of parents feel helpless right now. They're deeply concerned, how do I keep my kids safe online? And they don't know how to. They don't know what to do. And my first question is simple. What advice would you give a parent who's scared about their child, about their teenager, and what common sense steps can parents take to keep their kids safer? Dr. Twenge, why don't we start with you?
So I completely agree. Parents are in a really difficult position these days, but I also strongly believe that as parents we shouldn't give up. And I have 3 teenage kids myself, so I'm living this every day. So first, delay giving that smartphone as long as you possibly can. If you feel like they need a phone, give them a flip phone, give them a phone designed for kids that doesn't have internet or social media or those AI companion apps. Delay them getting social media for as long as possible. So what I hear really often is, then my kid will be the only one, and they tell me they have to be on social media to have friends at all. That's a complete myth. Kids have so many other ways they can communicate with each other online. They can FaceTime, they can text, they can call, they can even better go over to each other's houses. My 19-year-old said to me recently, this is very meaningful and correct. She said, look, if there is someone who will not communicate with you unless it's through a specific social media platform, that person is not actually your friend. You can find other ways to do this. So we do have to hold the line as parents. It is not easy, and I know that myself, but we can take those steps to keep our kids off social media until at least 16, if not 18, and just put off that smartphone as long as possible.
Ms. Cherkin?
My approach is what I call tech intentional, and there's 3 parts to this. Later is better, less is more, relationships and skills before screens. I'm also a parent of 2 teens who are here today to hear this, and I will tell you that parenting in the digital age is the hardest thing I've ever done, and I taught 7th grade for 12 years. So I really want to extend my sincere empathy for parents struggling. I often say this isn't our fault, but it is our responsibility to do something, and we are learning about what's good and what's not good when it comes to screens in children. So when we know better, we need to do better. And to that point, I really believe that parents have an opportunity to be the role models for their children as well. We talk a lot about how this is children's use, the way it's impacting children, but adults are terrible users as well. It doesn't take much to look around and see people on their phones, totally distracted ourselves. So how we behave is how our children will behave. And I really also cannot emphasize enough the importance of collective action, that being that first parent to say, wait a minute, I'm gonna delay, and then finding a second and a third parent to join you makes this effort a lot easier. So we just need to get to a tipping point. But to all the parents out there who are struggling, you're not alone. This is a pretty universal problem. Thank you.
And I have to admit, I find it comforting hearing that both of you are struggling. I am the father of 2 teenage girls, and I think Middle East peace is easier than raising teenagers. And I will say it's striking in the Senate. Look, the Senate is a place where you have people from very different generations, but in my experience, in particular, the senators who are on the younger side of things, who are in their 40s and 50s and have kids at home that are either adolescents or teenagers, are experiencing these same struggles, these same panic, this same, how do I keep all of these forces that want to tear my children apart? How do I protect them from this? Australia enacted a ban on social media for those under age 16. This is a yes or no question for everyone. Should the United States consider a similar policy of restricting children from using social media until a certain age?
Yes, 100%.
Yes.
Yes.
As you know, Senator Schatz and I have introduced the Kids Off Social Media Act, COSMA, which would ban children under 13 from social media and would also prohibit algorithmic boosting for teenagers under 17. It would also get cell phones out of the classroom by blocking social media in most public schools. I'm glad to see that this committee moved COSMA out of committee by an overwhelming bipartisan vote. For each of the witnesses, do you agree that COSMA lays the groundwork to protect children from excessive screen use?
I think it does. I think it's meaningful progress. I would want to raise that minimum age for social media to 16, but it is a great, great start.
Absolutely, step 1. Yep.
I agree. It's a start, and I would raise the minimum age to 18.
I think the pros are that it enforces under 13 and addresses the feed, which I think is a critical mechanism. I'm worried that it doesn't cover video games or other platforms, and it doesn't have duty of care measures.
Well, and for what it's worth, I'd love to raise the age. I'd love to make it stronger. One of the things to pass legislation is you have to find bipartisan agreement and compromise, and that means you don't necessarily get everything you want. Final question. Dr. Twenge, do you think the ed tech devices that are being used by our kids, do they come with sufficient guardrails, filters, or blockers to make sure that they're focused on education?
They do not.
And so what should be different?
We need better blocks. I think IT departments, particularly at public schools, are overwhelmed and underfunded and just have not, unfortunately, done a good job blocking streaming services, social media, pornography, and so on from these school-issued devices, which have become entertainment devices instead of what they should be, which is educational devices.
Yeah. Thank you. Senator Cantwell.
Well, continuing on the just general questions, I think, Dr. Twenge, your research, pointing to 2012 and the change in policy, do you all believe that Congress should act and do something on AI because the acceleration of those trends are just going to quadruple in problems? Do we need to take action to do something on AI specific?
I think so. We don't, of course, have as much research on AI because it is so new. But as a parent and as a researcher, I'm even more concerned about the AI companion apps than I am about social media. It is terrifying to think that our kids are having their first relationships with these sycophantic chatbots. How is that going to translate to real human relationships?
Yeah, and I totally agree. The data that has come in over the last 3 years, K through 12 specifically, take adults out of the equation, ChatGPT is not good for learning. All I care about is the learning stuff, and cognition goes down whenever we touch it. So maybe a good tool for adults, but not for kids.
I believe absolutely, and AI is making all of the existing problems of ed tech worse. I don't believe it belongs in the hands of children doesn't belong in the hands of children at all.
Thank you.
Yes, we need regulations. My biggest concern is attachment and relationships. Kids are wired to want to attach to other humans. It's how they learn their sense of self, what a healthy relationship feels like, and the AI companions are exploiting this.
Well, I want to bring attention, because this committee did have a hearing several years ago about how Facebook was specifically using information for agitation purposes. And a whistleblower came to say that they knew they were doing it and continued to pursue the algorithms, even though they had been informed that they were. And so I think Miss Professor, Dr. Cherkin, you in your testimony say being fed, quote, algorithmic-driven, rage-bait content designed to increase engagement, they lose the ability to form their own opinions, detect bias, and think critically. So that is what these agents are doing, and many other things. But the engagement is being driven by this anger. And literally, kids are being attacked by agents, by chatbots, the Grok situation. It is like they are purposely being used against children. So, Dr. Radesky, you said Michigan was working on a few solutions. I brought up all these bills that we need to pass here, the Blackburn bill, the Markey bill, doing something about AI and privacy. What else is Michigan doing that's further helping in reining in the bad practices?
Yeah, Michigan just introduced a companion chatbot bill that is restricting the use of companion chatbots that have the potential to encourage self-harm, suicidality, violence, drugs, alcohol, or eating disorders. They're restricting AI chatbots from providing mental health therapy, suggesting illegal activities, producing CSAM, engaging in erotic or sexual interactions with youth, which is a big engagement way that chatbots have been trying to get more users, and limits on optimizing for engagement. And I think it's important that states be able to pass AI bills.
Thank you. And what about this issue related to TikTok where the chat boxes are specifically attacking kids on things like eating disorders, some of the Rutgers information? How do we get the word out that this is what's happening? You know, we're doing a good job here evangelizing that we need federal legislation on AI, but what else do we need to do to get parents to realize that TikTok itself and the tools used there are attacking kids?
So some social media companies are embedding AI chatbots into their user interfaces, which is one way that kids are discovering them. So we need rules about being able to inactivate them without having to pay to inactivate them. And we need to make sure that families also can opt out of things like an algorithmic feed or having the presence of AI chatbots in products their kids are using.
Okay, but clearly people don't understand that TikTok itself is being used this way. So.
Well, I'm not as familiar with the specific case that you're talking about, but our general approach in helping families is, number one, to talk with kids about what they're seeing. Use news reports as conversation starters, because when you hear about a case like that, you can say with your kids, are you hearing about this? Are you seeing this in your feed? What are you doing about it? What do you think tech companies should do better? That's a much better way to kind of open the conversation and hear kids' solutions, and then motivate them to perhaps take a break from that, you know, from TikTok or whatever platform is, which they think is using unfair practices.
I think we need to be very loud and clear that the federal government needs to do something on AI. That you here are telling us the problem with social media, but you're basically saying AI is way worse. So it's time to step up. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Ranking Member. Thank you, witnesses. I couldn't help but think during your testimonies that I wish I could transport my kids here. They're in their 30s and 40s, so I've got my grandkids, 18 of them, who I worry about. And I also had a little moment of reflection during your testimonies to my childhood. And there was a similar conversation at the time about how bad TV was for young kids. But imagine the difference between me coming home after school and flipping on the TV and seeing content that had been put out there, right, for everybody versus that TV didn't know who I was, right? That TV didn't have a world full of people thinking ahead that next time I turned on that TV, they were going to show me this content to influence me to do this thing. And it's really very, very different because of this vast network that's kind of behind that TV, right? Targeted at that young child who's going to turn that on. So I have a series of questions. They may almost be rhetorical, so I'm going to go through them rather quickly. And instead of asking you for an answer, you just give me a nod. And if you want to say no, then I want to hear from you. But I want to codify, I think, some of the things that have been talked about into some real specifics for people that might be listening to these hearings. So the first one, are algorithms designed to be addictive? Okay, yes. Do those systems or algorithms often function in ways that resemble addictive or compulsive use patterns? I'm getting yes. Do you believe these companies have internal data to measure when their products are driving unhealthy usage patterns like late night use, compulsive refresh, and escalating content intensity? Does their business model incentivize profit over well-being? All right, I got it. Just for the record, we got unanimous yeses on all of those. I had intended to ask you all if you were aware of specific research that documented this, and Dr. Twenge gave us this. So I'm going to change that question to, are any of you not aware of data that documents all of this?
I'll jump in, there's a court case going on right now, I believe in California, that Meta and a lot of these companies had to release a lot of internal documents, so people are going through them now. Exactly what we feared is coming to pass.
Yeah, in a hearing in this room before, I've actually compared this to the tobacco hearings, where executives were brought up and they had data, they had research that it was harmful, and tried to tell us it wasn't. I actually believe in a hearing not too many years from now, we'll have a similar hearing with social media companies. I'd like to, just for a minute, pivot just a little bit and talk about the impact of this, not just on children, but on everybody. Last year, Senator Kelly and I introduced a bill. It's called the Algorithm Accountability Act that would finally let people have their day in court if they were harmed by algorithms. So, Dr. Twenge, let me start with you because you have this report specifically targeted at kids. What do we know about the impact of this, not just on kids, but on teens, young adults, and on adults? And is the impact similar? Is it just less visible? I understand why we're focusing on kids, but I would like to have that conversation about adults as well.
Well, particularly for young adults, we have a lot of data, and depression rates have also doubled among young adults, perhaps because they were also introduced to these technologies as adolescents during that critical period. And there are several studies as well looking at young adults who, for example, give up or cut back on social media versus those who continue their normal use, and then what happens after 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And most of those studies show better outcomes, say less depression, more happiness among those who give up or cut back on social media. And most of those studies were done with adults. So we see a lot of the similar effects in adults compared to in adolescents and children.
Yeah. Anybody else want to weigh in on the impact on adults?
Yeah, it's exactly what you'd expect to. I was just got back from a trip to Vegas. It was my brother's first time. And as we were walking through a casino, he looked around and said, "The happiest place on earth," because everyone was just sitting there blindly at their slot machines. Basically, that same exact thing is happening with screens. Even in this room, I'm not calling anyone out. Basically, everyone has touched their phone at least once today.
Senator Marino and I were talking about.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, give him a few minutes. Senator Marino and I were talking about how my adult kids have had a hard time learning how to navigate, and it's because when they were learning to drive, they were given an app that said turn right, turn left, and they never had to think like we did about how to move around, and I think that applies to what you're talking about. And I regret that I'm out of time. I would love to continue this question. Thank you all for being here. I think this is an incredibly important topic. I yield my time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, all of you. I've done a lot of work in this area, as you probably know. And I will start with you, Dr. Twenge. I understand you grew up in Winona. Is that correct?
Till I was 7, yes, and still have lots of family in Minnesota.
Great, and you're wearing white Vikings purple and Prince purple, which we appreciate. So you're a strong proponent of bell-to-bell bans on phones in school, and as am I. What outcomes do you see in schools that have instituted these kinds of bans?
So many, and we're still building up the research literature in this area, but there are several studies, and then there's also, in the past year, there have been more and more schools that have instituted those bell-to-bell bans. And generally, you get better mental health, better academic performance, fewer discipline issues is a big one that principals report. So some good outcomes that we really want to see.
Very, very good. Thank you. I think it's good to get those out there as schools, more and more schools are looking at this. Dr. Radesky, social media platforms generated $11 billion in revenue in 2022 from advertising directed at kids and teenagers, including over $2 billion in ad profits. Talk about the financial incentives that they have and why that should make us act with the number of the bills, Kids Online Safety Act, and others. Talk about the incentives they have that are counter to what we think we should be doing.
Yeah, when business models are built upon ad revenue generation, it means that the longer you have a user using your product, the more ad impressions you get, and then you're able to make more money from the advertisers, especially if it's targeted advertising. So you can collect more data, the more people watch. This is especially with short form video because you can consume a lot more content in the space of 5 minutes with short form, and that tells the platform so much more about you. What you watched, what you hovered over, what you shared, and then
so
they
the more they get addicted to the screen, the more information the kids do, the more information they get. And
Correct.
the more money they make.
Right.
Okay, go ahead.
One of our first studies we did on kids' apps, we looked to see how many ads were showing up, and it was remarkable how many were popping up in the middle of gameplay. They'd have banners across the bottom for things like bipolar disorder treatment. It was
Unbelievable.
clearly
So in your
inappropriate.
testimony, you also expressed concern about AI chat boxes, and how do these toys interfere with kids' development?
Yes, I joined the letter from Fair Play concerned about AI toys this holiday season because in early childhood especially, kids have so much animism. They have a lot of trust and a huge imagination for their stuffed animals, for other characters, and they can become very attached to media characters. And there is research showing that when you interview 4- and 5-year-olds about things like an AI assistant like Alexa, they say, I think it has feelings. I think it could be my friend.
they do, yeah.
It would be fun to spend time with if I was lonely. And so there's both philosophical concerns that you're building a relationship with AI that's basically stored in a company's servers. There's also practical concerns that play is much more supportive of your imagination, of your cognitive flexibility, your self-regulation when it's open-ended, not led by the programmer's ideas.
Completely. Just this week, we've seen Grok, X's AI's chat box, altering photos of people, particularly women and girls, without their consent to show them wearing little or no clothing, placed in sexually compromising positions, or even engaging in sexual acts and then posting them on X. So I believe that these posts are violations of the Take It Down Act that Senator Cruz and I worked very hard to get done. The criminal piece of this involves those that are posting, but the platforms are also required to take it down. That's taking effect in a few months. And there have been many even conservative commentators who are very concerned about this, and it just shows, like, if we're not even going to put these rules in place, why we need guard rules federally, even if the risk of being sued. How can these intimate images, including deep fakes, impact young girls' psychological well-being?
It's an incredibly negative impact, and it needs to be taken very seriously. It affects a sense of shame, leads to feelings of suicidality, depression, anxiety. So we shouldn't underestimate the impact on the young victims.
Did you want to add anything, Ms. Cherkin?
I would just say that, all of these apps are designed for engagement, right? So it's social media, the notification apps, AI chatbots, but also the products that are being used in schools are driven by the same engagement process. So the ed tech apps, the gamification of quote unquote educational content is equally concerning for me as well.
Yeah, I'm just shocked that they won't change this and take it down. And it shows what we're dealing with right now.
Exactly.
And it really shows where at least one company is coming from. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Senator Schmidt.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for having this hearing. I think when I was an attorney general in my previous job, we dealt with a lot of these issues, including the censorship case. And so I think there's like there's like a triple, three-headed sin of, you've got the criminal aspect, which I think everyone can kind of agree needs to be dealt with. You've got the under 18 or the kid aspect, which is the focus here, which I'm glad we're doing. Then you also have this kind of, the Section 230 protections, which in a perfect world were meant to have an open platform, and that's why you had the liability protections. The problem is when the social media companies become publishers, not platforms, they should lose that Section 230 protection. There's not really been a hammer behind that. But on the kid aspect, which is my hope that we can find broad agreement, bipartisan agreement on what to actually do about it, which is why you guys are all here, and I appreciate your testimony. I want to dig a little bit deeper into, I guess, the business model or how you guys see it or what you've, through your research or in your testimony. Dr. Radesky, you found that early childhood YouTube videos had the highest advertising load. And in some cases, the ads were longer than the videos themselves. Why does YouTube intentionally overload children with ads?
There's a huge market for young children's content on YouTube. There's a couple of reasons for this. One, it's very successful. Two, parents of young children are exhausted, and so they use YouTube to occupy kids. And so there's tons of ad space to be filled. There are even, I've seen YouTubers who are now instructing other YouTubers on how to create AI-generated content for young children, like little nursery rhymes, because they know it's a huge source of ad sales. So I think there should be limits on the ad load and the way that kids' attention is monetized.
This is I don't know the answer to this. It's an open-ended question to you or anybody else. So I'm Gen X. So the big, controversy when I was growing up was Saturday morning cartoons were a thing like that. Like you got up and you watched some cartoons on Saturday morning, and there was all this, cereal ads. This was something this now seems, rather innocuous, but big cereal was in front of the, kids, and then we would go to the grocery store and tell mom to get something, right? How is this different than that? I think I have some idea, but how do you guys, why is this much more significant and different than that controversy maybe in the 80s?
It's an element of control and directability. Is when we were growing up watching TV, and there's an argument to be made, TV was bad for us, so were the ads for us, just not as bad. There was, you had no control. Like we were talking about earlier, whatever was on the TV, we all watched it. So there was a certain element of collectivism where our identities were formed around one thing that none of us touched. Today, it's all individualism. Everything you watch will be geared towards you, which means the ads you see will be geared towards you, and it shoves you into a very small path, which really narrows your identity and who you can.
And what all of you are saying is that study after study shows you that the further down that path you go is really destructive to a kid's mental health.
Bingo,
right?
Bingo. It isolates you and it leads to loneliness and things.
And as I have a special needs son, but I have 2 teenage daughters, and so I can, we live this also. So I think as a legislator, you bring those experiences. It's very difficult. Dr. Twenge, I want to ask, most American teenagers use YouTube and TikTok daily. You've described TikTok's algorithm as very sophisticated and very sticky, meaning that the more a child uses it, the more likely he or she is to be depressed. Do you believe social media platforms like YouTube and TikTok knowingly design addictive features targeting kids?
I do. That's their business model. The more time people spend on it, the more money they make. So they have poured millions, if not billions of dollars into those algorithms to make sure people use the app as much as possible. And TikTok in particular, their internal research, they know that that is especially effective with children and young teens because of brain development and impulse control. They have the biggest problem with spending an excessive amount of time.
So it would be your testimony that they know not just that they can sell more ads, but they know that this is harmful to kids.
That is with the internal research that they have done, as well as the external academic research shows, yes. Yeah,
so we have limited time. I appreciate you all coming here. I know it's not easy to get to Washington, but my hope is that we could come together on something that it's much harder to deal with adults and what algorithms do and First Amendment issues and terms of service. But with kids, we have the ability to do something about that, and it's my hope that we will. Thank you.
Thank you. Senator Hickenlooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. Obviously, such a crucial issue. Let me start just by recounting an example of how our misconceptions sometimes cloud our decisions. On the west slope of Colorado, far west, rural area, a county school district decided that they were going to ban all cell phones from the school, the high school, middle school, everybody. And of course, the anticipation was, and this was in the newspapers, this was everywhere, that the kids are going to hate it, and the parents are going to come unglued, and they wouldn't be able to, what if an emergency, the same questions raised again and again. They did this anyway. And within 3 months, there was universal acclaim from the children at every grade level. There was almost no parental disapproval, universal acceptance, and a recognition that having kids be able to focus and not be distracted, whether you're talking about at lunch or at school, became a point of pride that the entire school district was embracing. And I'm not saying that we should be going out and dictating to every school district in America what they should do, but I think these examples where we see that what we anticipate, what we think is going to be the problem, doesn't materialize, and we're able to actually see a dramatic improvement by letting that local school district, their teachers, their students, actually have the control and make the right decisions themselves. I do think we have to do a better job of training everybody connected to make sure everybody understands what the risks are, what we're doing. We've got nearly 1/3 of our students report that having at some point during the day having personal conversations with AI using school-provided devices or platforms. Only 1 in 10 teachers report receiving training or information on what to do if they suspect this is the case, how they should respond. There are growing concerns regarding how the emotional development of these kids is impeded, whether the issues around dependency, safety, not to mention the privacy protections for these tools that now can see so much of kids' digital lives. So let me start, Dr. Radesky. How can we better equip both our parents and our teachers en masse to respond to children when it becomes evident that the student AI use is affecting them in what potentially is a very harmful way?
Well, I think of solutions as both systems level and then on an individual level. So systems level, I think we need to work with the internet filtering software companies to make sure they are really doing an accountable and thorough job at blocking unauthorized AI chatbots from school-issued devices, as well as the other distractions I mentioned. Because if we can prevent the upstream harm in the first place, we should. Second is through the AAP Center of Excellence on Social Media and Youth Mental Health, we've been providing trainings. We've now trained over 25,000 either teachers, parents, clinicians on how to engage with youth around the challenges around social media, and we plan to do the same around AI because we're getting more questions about it. So if there can be really, national trainings to help people talk about it, kids are going to AI when they're lonely, when they don't know who to talk to. They're worried about being judged. And so we also need to help with the connection skills and the relationship skills so they feel like they have human connection.
Right. I couldn't agree more. I think, and I'll try and be concise on this question, because I think one of the issues is active versus passive engagement with technology. And I think I'm on Maslow's pantheon of scientific success, I was a geologist, which is down near the bottom. Perhaps the least, I'm going to get myself in trouble with geologists all over the country, but less mathematical and technical than many. But I spent years working both as a mayor, as a governor, on our workforce pipeline, very concerned about the engagement of kids with STEM at an early age. All the modern jobs, kids have to be fluent with technology. But again, we need to protect them, as we're all discussing, from some of the downsides of social media and AI. Fields like quantum computing or semiconductor innovation, kids have to understand on a deep level, and they just can't have AI answering every question for them without them exploring. So, and I'll ask any one of you, I'll let you fight over who answers. If we're going to really build the problem-solving and technical skills required for jobs of the future, how can parents and educators encourage the active over the passive style of learning?
By eliminating K-12 one-to-one connected devices, because none of the people who were successful in those skills as adults had those as children. And so if we want our children to be set up for success in the future, we actually need to give them a childhood filled with analog skills first. And I bet Jared has a thought on that.
Yeah, technology is a tool for experts to offload their skills. I know how to do stats. I don't feel like doing it. This tool helps me do it. They are not tools for novices to learn how to become experts. When they offload before learning the initial process, They have no clue, and now they're at the whim of whatever the machine tells them. And so I think one of my favorite statistics is the only time we've measured digital literacy. It's called the ICILS. It's the only international test on this. 2013, 2018, 2023. Between those years, the percentage of kids who are digitally literate has dropped 22%. Yet the amount of money we have spent has increased by $6 billion, and the percentage of kids who spend time every day on a computer at school has gone up 550%. So clearly, the secret to learning how to use tech is to not use tech. It's to learn analog, learn how we normally learn, and then use tech once you already know how to think to make that thinking easier. So that's what we're kind of seeing.
Thank you. I appreciate this. We can go on. I could spend an hour having that discussion. And I yield back to the chair. Thank you.
Well, and I will say, Senator Hickenlooper, is a word of encouragement. In Texas, we love geologists. Senator Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll start with you, Dr. Radesky, and know that I was on my phone to make certain my two daughters who are raising a 4-year-old and two 2-year-olds were listening. So you're speaking to them and to the American people when I ask you these questions, Dr. Radesky. How much of a threat is this to children? Or maybe said a different way, is there a greater threat to the children of the United States of America than the topic we're discussing today?
It is in the top threats. I would say poverty, trauma.
But all those things are related, right? Because if you don't have a childhood that allows you to learn and develop,
Right.
you probably aren't going to be in a good situation to be set up for the future either, right?
Yes, and all of these interact too. So if you have highly stressed families who don't have enough resources, they often over-rely on technology, both for managing kids as well as for learning. And so there's often more privileged families are able to have more boundaries and find more high-quality tech products. So I do worry that because it is so ubiquitous, it is interconnected with so many parts of childhood now that it really does feed it. And it's something that's modifiable. It's something that you can regulate and that you can peel back in some ways when it is not supporting youth development.
Right. And Mrs. Cherkin, you're on the same page with me when the question was asked about the age for social media, because I think we're dancing around the problem here. When we say that we have social media as an issue, well, why would we allow social media for minors? And we have a very strict definition in this country of what it means to be a minor. You have to be 18 years old. So could you even remotely make the case, Mrs. Cherkin, for anybody under the age of 18 to be allowed to access social media?
I mean, no, I don't believe it's needed. I think it becomes a social pressure, especially if you pick 16, it's the middle of high school. So you're saying no to the pre-16, but yes to the over, and how confusing that will be and difficult in a multi-age school environment.
And 13 is even worse, because now you're talking about middle school. So the point being that it's easier to just say writ large, under the age of 18, you can't use social media, because that's just, there is all kinds of problems in all these platforms. And we can dance around it, we can say you can do this or that or the other, but at the end of the day, we don't allow children to smoke.
Agreed.
That's not controversial. There's nobody, well, maybe a few lobbies that are saying that children should have access to cigarettes. But almost this is worse than the cigarettes for this generation.
It is a health-harming
At least it's visible.
product.
A parent can see, hey, my child is smoking a cigarette, I'm going to stop that behavior. You may not be able to see what they're seeing on social media. And it's almost the same kind of reaction. Like if you look at people who have addiction issues, when you remove what they have, they go through withdrawal. We understand that. We see that same kind of behavior on children. Children who are given iPads, they're on an iPad for half an hour, 45 minutes, an hour. I would disagree that that's a demographic issue. I have plenty of friends that have plenty of resources that park their kids in a corner with an iPad. So, but then you try to take the iPad away, and the kids resemble withdrawal symptoms. Do you see that, Ms. Cherkin?
Yes, these are health-harming products. They trigger reactions in people that are, and especially in children that are unsafe. And I believe that it is in the best interest of all children to limit their access.
So definitely 18 years old, under 18, no social media. That means no AI.
Correct.
And it makes our jobs a lot easier. It's just simple. Over 18, you're an adult. We have a universal understanding that once you're an adult, you are treated differently in this, from the nature of laws. And Dr. Horvath, from your perspective, does the same kind of logic not apply to smartphones, where if you're a child, why would you have access to a smartphone that then just makes it more complicated for the parent to have that discussion?
Yeah, I struggle to find any reasons anyone would need social media or a smartphone, but I could see why as adults do your thing. But before 18, if you have, the only argument you say is I need to get a hold of my kid. Flip phone or the school phone. There's a phone at the front of the school that's been working for 100 years. Go to there.
Yeah, I mean, Senator Schmidt mentioned he's Gen X, so am I. We were the last feral generation in America. They had to send ads on TV to remind our parents to think about where we were after 10 p.m., right? Do you know where your child is? Oh, geez. Now we track them. I'll finish with you, Dr. Twenge. Why would we, knowing how existential a threat this is to our children, and we fund from the federal level schools, why would we just not say, if a school allows children to have access to phones, you shouldn't have federal funding because you're going to cost us a lot more money in the long run? I think the point being, don't the four of you think at the end of the day, given the weight of this conversation, that we need to be much bolder in the approach to fix this and not be incremental? Social media has been around for 20 years. 20 years ago, we could have a conversation about, well, what will this do? We know what it does today. I'll let you have the final word, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Exactly. And those types of solutions that are not incremental seem to work better. The no phones during the school day, not just during instructional time. So the kids are talking to each other at lunch, for example. There's reports that in schools where they institute that, they're checking out books from the library when they never used to do that. And to your point about 18 for social media, one strong argument for that is when you sign up for a social media account, you have to consent to give away your data. What other contract do we allow 17 and unders to sign? You have to get parental permission to go across the street on a field trip if you're not 18 yet we allow 13-year-olds to sign away their data on social media apps.
Thank you, and for sake of completeness, I will have to note there are some things for which phones and technology are valuable. Senator Moreno mentioned he's Gen X, as am I, proudly Gen X. And I will point out a meme that I texted to Mike Lee and Marco Rubio last year. They're both proudly Gen X as well. And it is a picture of a shirtless dad feeding a beer to a 2-year-old child in his lap. And it says, Gen X, the last great generation before all you sissies were born. And there is great truth to the latchkey generation, and somehow we survived. And everyone Gen X is laughing like crazy, and everyone else is looking around going, I don't get it at all. So it's, if you played with Stretch Armstrong, you understand what I'm talking about. Senator Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you to this panel. This is a really great opportunity. I want to start with Dr. Radesky. In your testimony, you described some of the risks associated with generative AI chatbots that prioritize user engagement over the safety or well-being of the individual. I heard from a constituent who shared a story with me that an AI chatbot had convinced her adult son that he had made a scientific breakthrough, although he had not. It resulted in an over 60-day stay at a psychiatric hospital. Dawn wrote to my office after this committee's hearing on the President's AI Action Plan, raising deep concern about efforts to deregulate artificial intelligence and create a regulatory sandbox. She wrote, while they prioritize deregulation, my Wisconsin family has been destroyed. So I asked Mr. Chairman that the Wall Street Journal article telling this family's story be entered into the committee's record. I ask unanimous consent that the article be.
Without objection.
Thank you. Dr. Radesky, given all of your research, what would be the risks of giving AI companies waivers from federal or state rules or regulations?
Well, what worries me about all of the cases that have come out since generative AI has come to market is that there's case after case, which in the medical field, we would consider those sentinel events, where you need to suddenly stop using what you're doing, do a morbidity and mortality review, go to a root cause, and figure out what went wrong. You don't just keep releasing the same product. And so I'm worried that if we don't have laws where there is accountability and transparency, how are you training these models? What are your safety benchmarks? How are you responding when there is an adverse event like that? These are not going to be safe products. And the concerns are not just the relational concerns I talked about, but there's also the safety, giving bad advice, giving unsafe advice, the sycophancy, where you're kind of leading kids down a rabbit hole of different beliefs, and the sexual interactions as well. So we need many guardrails.
Thank you. I was listening with interest to Senator Hickenlooper's questions about American students gaining computer science skills, digital literacy skills, and of course, it's important for us to retain a global leadership in this regard. I heard your responses of, the best way is in an analog world to teach those skills. But how does one go about evaluating educational technologies, things that are purporting to be educational? You've researched how various apps that purport to be educational stand up to the science of learning criteria with very troubling findings. Let me start with Dr. Radesky. What can Congress do to help change the incentive system to favor quality content over manipulative content?
Some of this is about App Store design too, where I think the most successful apps, the one that are downloaded the most, make these educational claims. They pack themselves full of ads, but there's really no transparency for parents to know what is high quality and what is not. And so I also think that having some rigorous third-party evaluation, so it's not evaluations by the company that is trying to promote the app, or software product for schools. And then there is the transparency for parents. If my child is using Dreambox software every day, I want to know that that has been tested, that it's going to improve his math skills, that it's not selling data to third parties, and that it doesn't have engagement prolonging designs that are going to make him want to use it for hours and hours every day.
Yeah. In this realm of educational technology, is there any country or region that's getting it right that we should be looking to?
No, you go.
Surprise, surprise, Scandinavian countries. Sweden has banned most ed tech for primary years and almost all ed tech for secondary as well. They start to bring it in at high school years. Norway just followed suit, and Finland is now, I'm giving them about 2 months, they're gonna go on the way. They just looked at the data and they said, this ain't working, let's go back to learning. Whereas the rest of us look at the data and say, how can we make it work better? Man, I could ask you, how do I make anthrax better? Maybe the answer is you don't. You go back to not using it.
Yeah, thank you.
Sorry, that was weird. Sorry, y'all.
Senator Young.
I'm going to defer to Senator Sullivan. Let him go
Thank
ahead,
you,
Mr.
Senator
Chairman.
Young.
Senator Sullivan.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And by the way, I didn't think that was a weird answer. I kind of loved it. That might be the takeaway from this hearing. So anthrax and big tech. Anyways, Mr. Chairman, thank you. And thank for holding this hearing. It's such an important hearing. And I want to thank the witnesses. Look, we got to get our arms around this. And I want to talk a little bit, but again, I just want to have you guys touch on some of the facts, and then I want to talk about a bill that I had just passed the Senate right before Christmas. We're trying to get the House to pass it, and it's, I think, an important step on one element of trying to address this. But you saw in 2021 the Surgeon General release an advisory report on youth mental health that said that cited a 2019 study that found 1 in 3 high school students and half of female students in America reported persistent feelings of sadness and hopelessness, an overall increase of 40%
from 2009. So in 10 years. So you guys are all experts. Do any of you think that that is not directly related to the rise of online, young Americans staring at their iPhones 5 hours, 6 hours a day? Aren't those completely correlated? I mean, there's just no doubt, right? Does everybody say yes on that? Okay, I would agree. And then next, can't we also conclude, and we've held numerous hearings in this committee, that the platforms know this, the big tech companies know this, and they have not sufficiently protected minors on their own through their own actions. Isn't that another conclusion we can just definitively, you guys are experts, so we've had many hearings here.
Yes.
So one thing that I had a bill pass the Senate right before Christmas. It's called Ads for Mental Health. And the idea here is that, as you probably all know, the FCC requires television and radio broadcasters to have public service announcements on the airwaves because they get a license from the federal government for the use of those airwaves. So we say, hey, you should be doing something positive, public service announcements. Now, on the internet, there's no such requirement, and none of that happens, okay? So my bill is the first of what I'm hoping is 2 steps. One, it just requires a reporting for online advertisers to report back to us saying, hey, here's how much we spend on public service announcements to help with mental health or eating disorders or something like that. Now, I pretty much anticipating that the number is going to be 0, okay, because they're not doing that. And maybe it isn't, so that's what we're going to find out. But it's also meant to encourage them to kind of get off their fannies and say, hey, if you know this and you're not doing enough, maybe starting to put public service announcements that are positive, that can help young people, is something you guys need to do voluntarily, quit pretty quick. You got a lot of money, some of the richest companies on the planet, or else step 2 is going to be us mandating that they do it. The way we mandate, the way the FCC mandates television and broadcast and radio stations to do it. So I want to get your sense on what you think of this plan, because it's already moving. The House is probably going to pass my bill soon, and that's step 1. What have you done? The answer is probably going to be not a lot. Okay, then we're going to say step 2. Okay, then we're going to mandate the way we do television stations and others. So what do you guys think of that real quick? I know I'm almost running out of time, but it's an idea. It's not going to solve everything, but it could help. And they need skin in the game. And it's one element of a policy action that I think can matter. I'll just throw it out to all you guys.
I think it's great. I think you should involve youth in planning some of the design of these PSAs and look at
Couldn't agree more, by the way.
New Zealand's Keep It Real Online campaign, which uses humor to address some of these really stigmatized topics like online predators.
Great. Other witnesses have a view on this as we're looking to move forward in this direction. The Senate's already passed my bill, and so but we'll have round 2 here soon if we hear that and expect that they haven't really done much of all.
Like you said, it's a shot over the bow, and anything that gets them waking up saying, we're paying attention now. It's no more free game. It's a great move.
I agree.
Others?
I agree.
I would say yes, except I don't want that to replace what we've been discussing about minors should not be on these apps to begin with.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. This is just a suite of policy initiatives. Absolutely.
Great.
Great. Thank you.
And maybe that speaks to what we were talking about earlier with the educational side. How do we get parents to recognize some of this? Maybe if those ads are geared towards parents, that becomes an avenue for that kind of thing as well.
Good. Well, if you have other ideas, please submit them for the record, but this is one path that the Senate's already going down. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dr. Radesky, your research focuses around child-centered design as a way to minimize harms. Unfortunately, as you state in your testimony, studies undertaken in your lab show, quote, repeated instances of digital platform design that revolves around revenue generation goals at the expense of child well-being. What elements prioritized by social media platforms or digital product creators are directly at odds with the child's safety and well-being?
Well, one is time spent. So if you have design nudges that keep kids on longer, when it might be a good disengagement point. So when you are playing a game or interacting with an app, there are lots of points where you could pause and then decide to go do other things. And often we found that on those screens, there are all of these designs that kind of overload your decision making, and they offer these little rewards for keeping on going. They don't give you an X button to go to the home screen. So it's all of these subtle designs that kids may not even pick up on, that they haven't been given the option to disengage. So that's one example.
Can you provide a couple examples of design features that would mitigate harm to children? And then I'd ask you to maybe submit others to the record as well.
Yes, so one would be more stoppage cues, more friction within a digital product. And what I mean by friction is that right now most designs are often frictionless or low friction. So it's just easy to keep swiping, keep engaging with content, and then kids kind of go on autopilot. And they aren't even self-monitoring to know how much time has passed. Should I stop and do something else? So there are different design approaches that can, slow down the feed, not have as much kind of intermittent rewards showing up, or there could be reminders. Like our youth advisory panel at the Center of Excellence has said, if I set a timer for 30 minutes on a social media feed, I want to be reminded what I'd rather go and do at that moment. I don't want to have something that says time's up and then you can swipe away. They want something that actually supports their agency in meeting their goals.
So, Dr. Radesky, this is also to you. It's about E-rate. E-rate, for those of you that are not aware, is a federal program that provides eligible schools and libraries with access to the internet for students. Critical in my state of New Mexico, and I would argue in every other state, especially in rural states. Now, those that are opposed to E-rate often say that it leads to unsupervised screen time, which is not true. There's safety programs that anyone that benefits from the E-rate program have to comply with. As a matter of fact, maybe that's one solution as well, to just lay that across all of these internet platforms. If the legislation that so many of my colleagues have authored is not going to be brought before this committee and brought to the floor. So before I get to my question, just to set the record straight, E-rate no longer funds devices. That was a program during COVID, as we all know, educational content or curriculum. It helps schools and libraries by supporting the cost of infrastructure. Now, for those that claim E-rate is unsupervised connectivity, the program that I was referring to is the Child Internet Protection Act, CIPA, which is something I believe that all of us support in the Senate. In other words, schools need to block and filter that inappropriate content and that the harmful algorithms as well. So connectivity itself is not the issue here. If we want to protect kids, we need to focus on the tech companies. Now, Dr. Radesky, what are the risks to rural and urban schools eligible for E-rate if that federal funding for connectivity is eliminated?
Yeah, I practice in Michigan, and I treat lots of kids with learning disabilities who really benefit from vocational training programs. And in Michigan, a lot of that is automotive training. A lot of that has to do with computerized software and AI now. So those schools would suffer if their E-rate funding was pulled because it's helping teens get trained for real jobs.
I appreciate that. Now, I'm also concerned by the increase in news stories reporting inappropriate interactions between AI chatbots and kids. My colleagues and I recently sent a letter calling out the horrendous safety record of Grok, including the recent controversy that is creating non-consensual images of individuals, some of whom are minors. Now, apparently Elon Musk did an interview, said he doesn't even know what we're talking about here. I don't know that anything happens at that company without his eyes on it. But apparently he's trying to fix it, even though he doesn't know about it. We'll leave it at that. My concern here, and I'll submit these questions to the record as my time's about to expire, is not just with Grok, but there's others that are encouraging suicide as well, character AI. So I'm hopeful, Mr. Chairman, that while I appreciate the hearing, the expertise of the panel here today, that these execs get hauled in here. If they don't want to show up, let's use subpoena power. If we're concerned about kids, then put their asses in those chairs and have them answer questions and face the families. So I'm hopeful that one way or another, in one of these committees, one of us has the courage, not just to bring them in, but use the subpoena power and ask them when they're going to fix it. Not how, not if they know about it. When are they going to fix the damaging behavior of just lining their pockets with dollars at the expense of the health of kids all across America? Thank you for the time today.
Thank you, Senator Lujan, and I will say on that latter point, you are very much preaching to the choir. Senator Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you so much for your attention to these issues. And as Senator Lujan was saying, this is something that we do have to address. And it has been absolutely so frustrating that big tech has fought us every step of the way on any of this legislation. There are laws in the physical world that prohibit you from endangering children in any way, shape, or form. But in the virtual space, it's the Wild West. And you have companies like Meta, like Snap, like platforms like Instagram, YouTube, that really just don't care. And I had one mom I had been talking to about some of these issues. She was concerned about what was happening with her child. And I see some of my COSA mamas here. God bless you. But this mom said, you know, I feel like it's psychological warfare on my child and with what they're being subjected to. And so I think we all want to make certain we address this. Some of these toys, the AI toys that are out there, I think are very damaging. And I have grandchildren, of course, so when you hear them say they want to walk and talk, whatever kind of toy, that is a danger signal. As I tell my kids and their friends, do not buy any of these AI toys. I've got one right here, the Miko. And my staff has been quite entertained with some of these toys and things they will do, but it's very damaging. And of course, we had the Kuma bear that was telling kids how to find matches and knives and sexually explicit conversations. And when you hear some of these toys that try to replace a relationship and to say, I'm your best friend, and please don't go, and take me with you. This is just so damaging. And so, Dr. Twenge, let me come to you on that. Talk for just a minute about the impact that these have as they impact social development as well as mental health.
Yeah, so we've already seen from social media and smartphones a huge decline in the amount of time that teens are spending with each other. Used to be one of the main activities of adolescence, hanging out with your friends in person, and that has been cut in half. They're not going out with their friends, they're not going to parties, they're not doing any of these things. And now we're seeing that extend into childhood as well, with the time on the iPad, and then we will, I think, continue to see that if these types of AI toys become popular as well, if they end up replacing those friendships of children.
Before my time runs out, this will give you gems the longer you play with this. So every day they reward you. And so they give you these little gems to stay with them. Talk about what you're talking about, but then carry this over to the addictive nature, the intentionally addictive nature of this?
Right. I mean, whether you're talking about toys or the AI companion apps, all of those things increase what they call engagement, what other people would call addiction. So they have the rewards, the gems, all of those things push toward spending more time with the toy, and thus often less time with friends in person, less time talking to family, the things that are so developmentally essential.
And then safety by design. This is something we have talked about with COSA, and the importance of having these social media platforms and these AI platforms work on safety by design. Why is that important?
So all the things that we've been discussing in terms of these negative outcomes that we see in terms of academic performance, in terms of mental health, we have seen the results of this national experiment on our children and on our teens, and it has been a disaster, and we can do better.
Thank you very much. Thank you to each of you for being here. Senator Markey, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning to everyone. And I'm glad that the Senate Commerce Committee is holding today's hearing on screen time's impact on the young people of our nation. I just want to correct one thing that the chairman said in his opening statement, just following up on what Senator Lujan said. The chairman asserted that the Biden FCC expanded the E-rate program to enable, quote, unsupervised internet access in students' homes. That is incorrect. Under the Children's Internet Protection Act, all E-rate recipients, including those who purchased Wi-Fi hotspots for students using E-rate dollars, are required to have an internet safety plan that monitors the online activities of minors and to implement filters to block obscene and harmful content. The E-rate hotspots program was a responsible, carefully crafted effort to ensure that low-income students, had the same opportunities as their wealthier classmates. It's a program that illustrates my approach to technology during my entire career. Technology can be a force for good in children's lives, but only if its benefits reach all kids and only if we put strong guardrails in place to protect them from harm. In this way, there is a Dickensian quality to the internet. It is the best of technologies and the worst of technologies at the same time. It can enable, it can ennoble, it can degrade, it can debase. We want the benefits, we want to limit the harms. And that's why during the 1990s, at the dawn of the internet age, when I was the chairman, I authored the laws to both close the digital divide for students by ensuring every school and library had access to the internet. That's the E-rate, which I built into the 1996 Telecommunications Act, and then the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which remains the only federal online protection for children. Access to the internet went hand in hand with online protections. So Dr. Radesky, do you agree that technology can have benefits for students, but it must include critical safeguards as well?
Absolutely.
So technology has changed a lot since the 1990s, but of course, we anticipated all of this. There's nothing new. These are the hearings that we had in the 90s. Bad people are going to try to do bad things, and good people have to be empowered to do the good things. So this hearing was held in the 1990s. I chaired it in terms of all the terrible things that can happen online to kids. Otherwise, we couldn't have got that law passed. But back then, only birds tweeted, and TikTok was just a noise that a clock made, and no one had any idea what this internet thing was going to be that got unleashed by those laws. So today, social media platforms collect massive amounts of personal information on their young users to serve them the most convincing ads possible. And those targeted ads are big business for big tech. In 2022, the major big tech platforms earned nearly $11 billion from US users under the age of 18. By 2026, that number is exponentially bigger. And that's why I've been fighting to pass my Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA 2.0, which would ban targeted advertising to children, increase the age to 16, and have other protections that are built in to modernize COPPA's protections. And I'm proud this committee unanimously advanced COPPA 2.0 last year, and I'm hopeful that the House will take up the strong bipartisan language in that bill. So I want to turn to a technology that poses new risks to kids, AI chatbots. Tens of millions of teens across the country are using AI chatbots to answer questions, find companionship, practice social skills. And although AI chatbots may have some benefits, I'm deeply concerned that big tech companies will implement the same profitable exploitative formula to AI chatbots as they have done with social media. AI chatbots can simulate real relationships and emotional bonds with teen users, encouraging them to rely on technology for social and emotional needs and spend hours every day talking to the chatbots. More addictive algorithms, more manipulative design, more relentless data collection. To each of the panelists, yes or no, do you agree that AI chatbots pose new and unique risks to young people? Yes or no?
Yes.
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 Mr. Horvath? Yes, sir. Yes. I completely agree. If we have learned anything over the past decade, it's that big tech companies have no problem exploiting our kids to make a buck. We cannot allow AI companies to treat children as collateral damage to their reckless race to dominate AI. And that's why I am working on new legislation to confront the harms posed by AI chatbots. It is out there and it is coming for every single child in America and the world. That is what is happening right now. And I look forward to working with all of you and all of the committee members so that we can put those protections in place. To be honest with you, the reason I was able to do the E-rate and the Child Online Privacy Protection Act was that these companies didn't exist yet. There was no Google, eBay, Amazon, Hulu, YouTube. We passed the law so they could be created. Okay? They all came in to visit me in 1994, 95, 96. Every one of those tech geniuses, but they needed the country to go digital. And so we were able to do it when they were weaker. Now that they have become the AT&Ts and the cable companies that they said they were going to be created in order to make more accountable, they have just become what it was that they had beheld back then. They envied it. So we need to work together. Let me turn and now recognize Senator Young.
Thank you, Senator Markey, and thank you to our witnesses for being here today. We, as you can see, are cycling in and out of the committee hearing. So I just was hoping to level set and maybe step back, and you may have discussed this in varying ways already, but I have 3 high school children. I have a daughter who's in college right now, and the issue of socialization is something I think about, and the impact that social media has had on their lives. And my kids are fairly resilient and all the rest, but nonetheless, they, like other young people, are susceptible to all kinds of pressures and influences online. And one of the things as a parent I've been struck with over the years is the difficult decisions that parents have. It's not as simple as cutting them off because social media is bad and allowing them on. You have to balance all sorts of competing incentives and disincentives. So among the things we have to deal with in terms of socialization is the fact that their friend groups are on. And these are good kids who are on, who have good families. And if they're on, and that's their primary means of communication, which it is, and your kids aren't on, they lose their friends. Or if you're girls, you become subject of, no, that's not the logical outcome. I'm seeing negative. Well, this is why you're here. I want to entertain these conversations. If you're not part of, let's say, 70% of the conversations that occur in your friend group, is the depth of your friendship as meaningful?
Absolutely. And in fact, more so because it's held in real time. It is held one-on-one.
Right.
And in most studies, the teens who do not use social media at all are the happiest and the least depressed and the most satisfied with their lives. So I think that speaks volumes. And of course they have friends. Friendship is better based on other
Let me
things.
dive further since you're familiar with the literature. So you can distinguish between the power, the effect, the authenticity of online conversations. They're an entirely different animal than in-person conversations, because I suspect you would say, or maybe find in the research, that the more conversation you have with someone in person, the more you're communicating, the deeper the relationship.
Exactly.
You're saying the opposite is the case online. Or the effect is much weaker or something,
I'll
right?
give you the biological.
Yes, Dr. Horvath.
Oh, sorry about that. Oh,
Please.
sorry. The biological mechanism is when we interact live and in person, as of today, your body will release a set of chemicals, one of which is oxytocin, which is a bonding mechanism. When we see surges in those chemicals, we know we're forming a connection. When we interact via text online, the body does not release oxytocin. It releases a different set of chemicals, primarily tachykinins, which are the precursor to chemical depression. So in a very real sense, we can say biologically, text-based communication is not recognized as actual interaction by our body.
What about FaceTime, for example, or Zoom or other things?
Yes, if you can see somebody's face and hear their voice, you can get away with it. That's why when we were growing up with phones with the long cord and you would run into the pantry to talk to your girlfriend or boyfriend, that worked for oxytocin. But how many of our kids are FaceTiming? The data on the percentage of time they spend on FaceTime versus communicating with each other on Twitter.
Not as much.
Yeah, exactly.
That's my sense. Very interesting. Yes.
I would just add, I do think it is a parental challenge in the sense that we feel and we hear from our children that they feel left out. And I also would argue that it's convenient to blame parents and make them feel like, for the tech industry, let me be clear, to blame parents to say that, look, your kid's going to be left out if they don't do it. And so I would see an option here to empower parents to say no because of this research that says it's better for, and we need those courageous parents to take that first step.
Has there been any test? I would wonder, and I'll give you an opportunity to, Doctor, but I find this among the females in my house in particular. I hope people are comfortable with the fact that male and female conversations may be different on balance. I am. And so I also wonder, my daughters have very good friends, but might the person who's not part of even the online conversations become a subject to those conversations if you're not plugging in enough? So is that something we should not take seriously and be dismissive of? Or Doctor, please go ahead.
I think it's important to acknowledge heterogeneity. So kids have different peer groups, different social skills, different interests, and sometimes the online chat really supports that and carries to offline, and sometimes it becomes full of drama or full of conflict. So I think one thing Congress could consider is investment in more offline third spaces for youth where they connect together in person and this could be after school programs, it could be sports and music programs. This is where a lot of those social dynamics and skills are learned. And if kids had those places to go to find their peers, they wouldn't necessarily be as online as much looking for their peers.
That seems very constructive. I like that suggestion. Thank you. Thanks for indulging me. We only have 5 minutes here, so we went down a bit of a wormhole, but it was helpful to me. So I will recognize Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Senator Young. Thank you to all of you and the audience members. I want to just say something maybe marginally provocative here, which is that I think empowering parents and blaming parents are kind of two sides of the same coin. Mm-hmm. I think most parents are powerless against these algorithms. And I think that, Dr. Radesky, I agree with 92% of everything you've been saying, but I'm quite skeptical of this model in which the social media platforms give you the opportunity to either tweak the algorithm or turn off the algorithm or whatever. No one's going to do that. And you're sort of, you might very well be empowering super sophisticated, super fortunate, super engaged parents. But The rest of us just need a law, and in some instances, an excuse.
Yeah.
And to the extent that there's FOMO among kids, adults too, who are not in the text string or the signal string or the DM or the snap or whatever it is, to the extent that it's impermissible, then people will find other ways. And my view is, yes, we should have after-school programs, they should be subsidized, all the rest of it. But those kids are not going to that thing if they're stuck on their phone because their frontal lobe has been hijacked. And so, Dr. Radesky, I just want to kind of try to ground this conversation in the research, and I'd like you to cite the research. I mean, you're sort of characterizing it, summarizing it, but I'd like to know exactly what research you're referring to. What does the research show about algorithmic feeds that maximize user engagement, and why are kids uniquely impacted by this?
So a lot of the research has been done by the platforms. So it is not available for external researchers to look at. But there was an interesting convening. So this was published last year by Cunningham, where there were academics and people who worked for platforms who got together to think of how to create better feeds. So they were reviewing the research on how engagement-based feeds compared to, say, a chronologic feed. And so they had all this internal research that they reviewed and cited in this publication, which I can share with your staff, about how engagement-based ranking leads to more time online, right? Which is one thing we're talking about with displacement of healthy behaviors. It also leads to more amplification of emotions. And we know that kids' brains in the teenage years are so sensitive to emotional arousal. So if you had an engagement-based feed, the users of that feed can experience much more intense anger, happiness, and stress. And so that can lead to more compulsive use.
And that's why the bill that's bipartisan, that's co-sponsored by the chairman, the Kids Off Social Media Act, I think the headline about COSMA is the 13-year-old threshold. Arguably, the more powerful aspect of COSMA is the banning of the algorithmic feed for kids who are permitted to be on social between 13 and 18. And so my own judgment is we're never going to prevent, we can't turn back the clock completely. There are use cases for social media that are beneficial or at least entertaining. And if not affirmatively good for your life, more in the category of Saturday morning cartoons, like your mom comes in and says, you're going to rot your brain, but they don't actually mean you're going to rot your brain in the same way that we mean it now. Mm-hmm. And so I think banning the algorithmic feed for kids who are not yet fully developed is a very powerful tool. Dr. Twenge, I kind of wanted to drill down on a specific question about schools. I think we should have a bell-to-bell ban. And I think that there are people on the left who don't love the idea of these, on the left and the right, who don't love the idea of a federal mandate. But honestly, everybody's a federalist or not, depending on what kind of objective you have. And to the extent that this is a societal emergency, I just wanted you to talk through, we have in COSMA a social media ban during school hours, right? Using E-rate, it's sort of very narrow. My judgment is like what Senator Hickenlooper said, which is like, we should just rip off the Band-Aid and not make this like Rube Goldberg machine where we think we're gonna kind of thread the needle and still allow. The problem is there are beneficial use cases and there are, idiosyncratic emergency situations for individual kids where they'd have to work around it if they don't have a phone on them, right? And yet, we're talking about population-wide questions, and in my view, a federal question of a whole society that is basically unable to interact like we've always been able to interact, and by the way, learn like we've always been able to learn. And I'm just wondering, where do you land on, should it be bell-to-bell? Should we just ban social? What do you think we should do, and what does the data say? I'm over time, so be quick.
Yeah, so the bell-to-bell is absolutely the way to go. So yes, great idea to say no social media, but then what happens? Then there's going to be some other distraction. Oh, let's watch Netflix on the device, or we're all sitting at lunch, but we're all staring at our phones, texting each other instead of talking to each other face to face. So those devices are distracting, and yes, social media is one of the reasons for that, but they are distracting, period, during the school day, and that bell-to-bell ban is the way to go.
Just one final thought. You're getting to it, right? Which is social media is particularly terrible for children. But like having all the world's information in your phone is probably not a great way to like lock in when it comes to learning algebra or American history. And so putting the damn thing away and making sure that no other kid has access to it is absolutely essential. Senator Kim.
Thank you, Senator Schatz. Thank you all for coming out here. It's very, very interesting. I guess I'm trying to think through and process some of what you've talked about and try to understand if there are any differentiations with the different types of features of social media. So I'm Dr. Twenge. I guess I'd like to just start with you. I mean, like there are, different features here. There's the algorithmic driven feeds, the endless scrolling, social comparison mechanisms. Is there a prioritization there in your mindset of the things that are doing the most harm? I'm just trying to get a sense of the ecosystem there and whether or not I should be thinking about these different features differently or individually, and if that helps at all kind of understand the different impacts that it's making.
So a lot of these things do work together. So it's difficult to separate them completely or to put a number on, which or ranking of which is the worst. But certainly anything that increases the time spent is going to displace time sleeping, time reading a book, exercising, spending time with others in person. So that's going to be the algorithmic feed, for example. Notifications, gamification, any of those features that are going to push time spent are absolutely going to be on that list of harm. But there's many others too. You mentioned social comparison of trying to strive to have that perfect body that everybody seems to have on Instagram, that even a lot of adults say, hey, isn't it striking that everybody is always on vacation on Facebook? And it just seems like everyone else's life is so much more glamorous than cyberbullying, body image issues, unknown adults contacting minors. I mean, one of the reasons I became so convinced that smartphones and social media were behind the adolescent mental health crisis is there are so many possible mechanisms.
Yeah. No, and as you said, I mean, some of it is about time spent, some of it is about potentially inappropriate content or content that can be emotionally disruptive. Others is about interacting with other people online and how that, I see it even within adults of just how it changes the way we might talk to people in person if we get used to talking to somebody that we think is more anonymized or that we have less repercussions back towards us. Dr. Radesky, I mean, I guess I'd like to bring you in here on this. I have an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old. And I've been hearing some of my colleagues talk about they have kids at other ages. And I'm trying to think through, like, am I thinking about 8-year-olds and 10-year-olds differently than 16-year-olds and 18-year-olds? Like, just help me kind of understand. Like, we talk about youth, kids writ large, but does it impact the different stages differently?
Yes, I'm glad you brought up the developmental differences. So when you're 8 or 10, you're still in a pretty logical and rule-based part of your cognitive development. Yeah. Sorry. You know some rules. You may not follow your parents' rules.
I see.
But you're more concrete in your thinking. So studies have shown that when 8 or 9 or 10-year-olds start social media accounts, they get over-focused on those concrete like counts or friend counts. So they may want to accumulate lots of friends, not knowing that those friends are child predators. So that is why it's very developmentally inappropriate for kids under 13. A couple of studies show to be on social media. Then you get into those 11 to 13 years where there's so much more drive to connect with peers. You get a little bit more of executive functioning coming on, but not all of it yet, so still not great impulse control. Once you reach more into 16 to 18, you get more abstract thought, and kids can reason a little bit more and have a little bit more self-control. I want to say, though, there's a lot of individual variability. I'm a developmental behavioral pediatrician, so my patients with autism and ADHD often are lagging in these skills. It takes a little bit longer. So if we were thinking of child-centered design that's most appropriate around ages 8 and 10, it probably still relies a lot on storytelling, learning about the world, great movies, great shows, not short-form content that they're just consuming and going on autopilot and, grabbing things in small bites.
I know this hearing is focused on youth, but just help me kind of understand, where does it stop? I mean, a lot of these concerns just perpetuate,
Absolutely.
right? And I guess I'm trying to distinguish what are we as a committee or as a Senate body should be thinking about when it comes to kids specifically, and what should we be thinking about just writ large within our society? Because I really do hope that we come up with bipartisan answers to this when it comes to kids, especially as I'm very uncertain what to do as a father coming up next as they get older. But I don't want us to be like, okay, we did our part, right? And try to help me kind of tease out, what are some things should we be specifically focused on for kids? And what are just kind of the broader harms that we should be thinking about writ large when it comes to even adults?
Adults, right. Adults struggle with problematic media use, social media use. I study parents and how their technological interference affects their parent-child interaction. So I would say comprehensive data privacy protections across all Americans, not just kids. And that way we can control what companies are collecting about us and how they're profiling us and how they're using that data. And then having especially chatbot laws into the adulthood also, because there are vulnerable adults who are overusing AI chatbots.
Yeah. Well, look, you all answered a lot of questions from a lot of my colleagues, so thank you so much for your attention to this. I'm sure we'll have more follow-up, but so much here. I hope you all take away and the American people take away, there is real bipartisan focus and interest on this, and I think a lot of urgency as well on the matter. So since I'm the last one here, I just want to thank all the witnesses for their testimonies here. Senators will have until the close of business on January 22nd to submit questions for the record. The witnesses will have until the close of business on February 5th to respond to those questions. So this will conclude today's hearing, and the committee stands adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.